I keep telling this story, and it is true still to this day. You know, when I came to Lakeview, I made a comment that I won the lottery. And it is true, and I stand by it still every single day because there are just so many things here at Lakeview that I am able to connect with. And I know that our students and our families that come to Lakeview also are able to connect with. And our outdoor learning spaces is one of those things.
Welcome to Healthier, Happier, Smarter, connecting with Wisconsin's outdoors through learning, stories, and communities. My name is Jaden.
And my name's Zaya.
What happens when learning moves outside the classroom?
You get healthier students, stronger communities, and deeper connections to nature.
Healthier, Happier, Smarter explores outdoor and environmental education across Wisconsin.
From schoolyards and forests to youth-led climate action and community programs. Join us as we share the stories shaping the future of learning and the outdoors. Healthier, Happier, Smarter is brought to you by the Wisconsin Association for Environmental Education in partnership with the James E. Dutton Foundation, a charitable foundation providing financial support to organizations working on projects which benefit wildlife, animal causes, environmental preservation, and outdoor education. Additional financial support comes from the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin and WAEE members and donors with in-kind support from Green and Healthy Schools, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to another episode of Happier, Healthier, Smarter, Wisconsin Voices on the Power of Nature.
Today we are talking with Nu Vang-Vue, James Kersten, and Deborah Craig from Lakeview Elementary in Madison. Lakeview has become a leader in helping students learn through meaningful outdoor experiences and nature-based learning opportunities. Welcome, Nu, James, and Deb. Before we get into your work at Lakeview, can you each tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Lakeview, and what brought you to education, as well as maybe one thing that you love to do outdoors?
So I have worked at Lakeview for about 10 years, but not in the current role that I have right now, occupational therapist. I started as a special ed assistant. And what brought me into doing education was my own children. So when they went to school, I wanted to go back to work, and I needed to do something where I didn't have to pay too much for childcare. So I started working for the school because you have the same time off. My son, Peyton, struggled with sensory processing when he started going to school. You know, there's a lot of sitting in school, a lot of rules to follow, it's noisier. And what I noticed as a special ed assistant is that he certainly was not the only one. There were lots of other kids who appeared to have sensory processing differences. So I decided to go back to school and get a master's in occupational therapy, which was very scary for me because I was 50 years old, and who goes back to school at age 50? But I did, and made my way back to Lakeview to be the occupational therapist there, which is wonderful. What do I like to do outdoors? Oh, just about everything. I'm an outdoor person. I would live outside if I could. I like camping. I like stand-up paddleboarding. I love gardening.
I'm with you on gardening. James, I'd love to hear a bit about you.
I grew up in the country. I grew up about an hour away from Madison over in East Troy. And I just have always been kind of an outdoors person, going outdoors, exploring everything outdoors. I kind of grew up on a farm as well. And so like we were always working, doing things outside. I got an education because I had some really good educators in high school, and I thought it would also be a fun and exciting way to have a job. And so I got an education that way. But then I eventually made my way to Madison, and I found my way to Lakeview, and it ended up being the place I wanted to be. I do a lot of going to the national parks, and I'm a really big national parks person. And so Lakeview kind of fits me really well.
I love that. And what is your role at Lakeview?
I am the physical education teacher at Lakeview, and I am the green team lead at Lakeview as well.
Woo! I have
Very
a
nice.
special place in my heart for green teams. Nu, I'd love to hear about you and all the great work you do.
Well, I have been the proud principal of Lakeview Elementary School for the last 8 years. prior to that, I was in a different administrative role in our school district. I often talk a lot about active discovery, and I ended up in education through this whole lifelong journey of actively discovering myself. But ultimately, I find that my work in education is really important and it's necessary because I want to make sure that the students that we get to serve every single day have an adult that they see every single day and they can make a connection and say, I look like that person, or that person looks like me. Outside of education and working with our students, I love to hike as well. My partner and I also love to go visit the national parks and just go hiking. I think it humbles you. It reminds you that the daily problems that you have are so insignificant when you think about all of the big mountains and trees and all of the wildlife that's out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, Nu, you touched on it a little bit in your answer, but can you tell me a little bit more about like your leadership style and just like how you've been successful in creating your school culture that values outdoor learning and student wellness?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I have a hard time answering the question around my leadership style. I don't know if there's any one particular word that describes it, but I do see my role as the administrator as someone who has the capacity or the power that's been given to them to create the conditions for people to thrive, whether that's your staff or your students. And so when I came to Lakeview, the concept or the idea or the philosophy of outdoor learning had already existed. Susie Hobart was a longtime educator at Lakeview and worked very closely with our parents who at one point in time had said, we really want to start a school garden. How can we do that? And so in partnership, they all were able to start our school garden and then eventually led into building partnerships with community organizations like Groundswell to protect and save the acreage of forested or woods right behind Lakeview, which then Groundswell gave to Lakeview as part of, our school property to add to our school forest. I keep telling this story and it is true still to this day. When I came to Lakeview, I made a comment that I won the lottery, and it is true. And, I stand by it still every single day because, there are just so many things here at Lakeview that I am able to connect with. And I know that our students and our families that come to Lakeview also are able to connect with. And our outdoor learning spaces is one of those things. Grateful for the amazing staff that has already started this work. And so I was able to just to slide right in and continue the work. Perfect example is in my first week at Lakeview, and principals usually start in the summer, right? And so I came here and there aren't any staff members in the building except for the custodian. And so I'm just getting myself situated in this office that I'm in. And all of a sudden, Debbie walks right into my door and just says, hi, I'm Debbie. And Debbie starts talking about outdoor spaces and then the people that are here that just volunteer their time, just generosity of the heart and time, right? And giving that to Lakeview. And then, of course, as Debbie and I are getting to know each other and talking, I look out my office window and, of course, I haven't met James yet. But here's James walking up the hill into our school forest. And then Debbie's like, and that's James. He's got lots of ideas he wants to share with you. And so, yeah, our partnership really kicked off on day one. And yeah, no regrets. I think that whatever ideas, suggestions, recommendations, thoughts that people share with me, I am always very willing and open to listen to them. And really, when I'm listening, I'm centering our students and the population of students and families that we get to work with on a daily basis and asking the question, like, how can we make that happen here at Lakeview within the parameters that we are given as a public school and also in service of the population of students and families that we get to work with. It's been so fun. It's been a fun journey, and I'm just grateful to be able to work with everyone that I have been able to work with to create this beautiful campus that we have for our students, for our families, and also for our larger community as well.
Well, firstly, wow, I think you were born for this role. You seem to be thriving and helping everybody else thrive. It's so refreshing to hear and so inspiring to see how passionate you are about this administrative role and getting part to be in your students' lives and your staff's lives. It's so refreshing. And thank you for the answer. It was really, really inspiring.
Yeah, Nu, I love hearing you talk. I remember the first time was at the Green and Healthy Schools conference that was hosted at Lakeview Elementary. And being in your space is so special because you can really see how much teachers are using the space and how much students love being outside. I remember seeing the little garden that you had on the side of the building and all the cute little signs that were in it. And it makes me smile to know that students have these opportunities here in Madison, kind of a more urban based city in Wisconsin. Now, James, I'd love to kick it over to you. And as an educator at Lakeview, how have you seen outdoor learning change the way students engage with the lessons that others teach, the lessons that you teach each day? And do you have a favorite outdoor lesson or moment with students that really captures why this work matters to you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. How does learning change the way students engage with lessons? Being the PE teacher, a lot of my lessons, a lot of the things I do end up being somewhat competitive in a PE setting in different ways, shapes, or forms. But most of the time, when I'm able to take students outside and we're able to do stuff in the forest, we're able to do stuff in the garden, we're able to do stuff around the school, it changes from being competitive to cooperative. And students have more of a sense of purpose and engagement in the school as a whole. And so being able to take students outside really kind of changes my lessons a little bit to students being able to walk around school and work together to pick up all the trash. Or we go out into the forest and we're moving wood chips. Or we're going into the garden and we're going to move some dirt into the garden so that we can plant plants, what we were doing earlier, just a couple weeks ago. And so it changes the way my students engage with themselves from trying to be competitive against each other to cooperative with each other and giving them a different sense of purpose and ownership at Lakeview and in just the community as a whole, because they come there, they bring their siblings, they bring their friends on the weekends, bring their parents sometimes on the weekends, and they are able to show off some of the different things they've done at Lakeview, even during PE class. In that 30 minutes, I'm able to take them and go do something with them outdoors. It just gives them more of a sense of pride, and they're able to bring that back to Lakeview and do that even on the weekends as well, which is great and exactly what I would want them to do just over the course of time. And then one of my favorite outdoor lessons or moments with students, or I'll give you two. Some of the very first times I started taking students out into the forested area at Lakeview, we would have students who would absolutely refuse to go into the forest. They wouldn't even go near it because they would say that their parents, their moms would tell them that it's not safe. They're not allowed to go there. They will get in big trouble if they go into the forest, because from what they had known up until that point is that going into spaces like that was not safe for them. And so they were not allowed to go there. And I would have students who would just flat out refuse to do it. And we spent, over the course of a couple of weeks, we spent a whole bunch of time making probably a 10 to 15 foot pile of sticks, because we were clearing out a large section of the forest to start building some trails. And all we did for those 2 weeks was I would send kids in and we would pull sticks out, and we just made a giant pile of sticks. And seeing students gradually warm up to seeing that the forest, just even on the side of our school, was safe. And for our students to be able to say, like, hey, okay, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to get in trouble, and it's pretty safe. I can just walk right in here, grab a stick, and walk right back out. And I would have students who would refuse to go in, and so they would stand on the edge on the mowed grass and they would have students go in, grab a stick, bring it to them, and then they would put it on the pile. And that was my first year at Lakeview, and that was my first experience with seeing students be afraid of the forest, and to see where they went from there to where they are now, where we have students going to our forest every single day for recess, and we have students who I can easily walk into the forest at any time during the school day or with after school clubs, and we can walk right into the forest and never once have a student stop at the grass and say, I'm not allowed to go in there. It really shows me like how far Lakeview has come and how far our outdoor learning program has come at Lakeview. And my second story is that I've been building a biking trails through the forest, and just seeing over I started this last fall, and now moving over to this spring for the last 3 weeks, I've been riding with my students, and they've now started to gain enough skills to be able to just come up and say, hey, I'd like to go ride in the forest. And now we are riding the trails in the forest with many of my students, and seeing how much their skills in bike riding have grown since last fall. I've had students who've gone from not being able to ride a bike last fall to now they're riding the trails in the forest. And that just is my new pet project that it's really happy that my students are able to access and have access to. Yeah, those are my two big stories right now. Big heartwarming spots for me.
That sounds so wonderful, James. I wish that I had the same opportunities when I was in elementary school. I remember sitting in a gym, every gym class, and hating it because I am also someone who loves to be outside and breathe some fresh air throughout my day. And giving that opportunity to students to take that mental break and really go outside and enjoy themselves, whether it's on the bike trails or picking up sticks, is really awesome to see that you're taking that physical education to kind of a different level.
Yeah, like I said, I wish I had something like this growing up. We just had like an entirely concrete filled place to go play at recess. It was not the most fun and not the best on our knees when we fell. So it's nice to hear that kids are getting more opportunities to be more involved with the natural world. So it's really good to hear. Deb, full transparency, when I was preparing for this episode, I got so excited to pick your brain just to talk a little bit more about your perspective as an occupational therapist at Lakeview, and just like how you've seen spending time outdoors kind of support students' like physical, sensory, or emotional development.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think that I have the very best job in the entire school because basically my job is to play with kids. As an occupational therapist, I help people build skills through their occupation, and the occupation of children is play. So, a lot of kids receive occupational therapy services in the school because they have difficulty with writing, right? They can't get the information from their brain to their hand to appropriately make the letters so it's legible or stay on the line. Visual motor difficulties are also very, very common. And so, you see kids who are writing and that looks like mountains of words, the letters piling on top of each other, no space in between words. And it's because their inability to get the information from the brain to the hand. And so bringing kids outside is hugely helpful because if we're looking at a fine motor difference, what I have learned as an occupational therapist is you can't get the muscles in the hand to work well, to get that dexterity until you have, the muscles closer to the center of your body strong. So you need the core to be strong. You need the shoulder to be strong. You need the elbow, the joint in the elbow to work properly before you can get the hand to work well. And so being outside, we can swing on the monkey bars, and that will help to strengthen the shoulder and the core. Even just taking a walk through the forest, right? We're working on core strength. Being on the merry-go-round, working on core strength. Pushing the merry-go-round, working on that shoulder strength. Because you can't have distal strength far away from the body until you have that proximal strength. So that's one way that I am able to use the outdoors to work with children to help with the things that are hard for them in the classroom. The other piece is sensory. A lot of kids are coming in with sensory differences. I mean, we all have sensory differences, right? Like I can't stand tags in the back of my shirt. They all come out. I can't do it. There are some times when the sound is too much and I myself have to wear earplugs. Like when I go to watch my son play basketball, the squeaking of the shoes makes me absolutely insane. So I have to wear earplugs. So children, growing up, you have sensory differences. And so helping people to identify those sensory differences and helping them understand their own sensory differences. And you can't do that unless you can pay attention to your body. So one way we help them pay attention to their body and to what's going on around them is to go outside and, find 3 green things or stop and listen and pay attention to only what you're hearing and tell me what you hear, and outside, of course, they can hear the birds, they can hear a lawnmower, they can hear other kids playing. I also will have them then work on that hand strength. So we'll get some clippers and we'll clip away some of the dead parts of last year's plants. I'll have them turn the water spigot on and off. That will work that hand strength, watering the plants, things like that. And they don't even know that they're working on building skills, which is really fantastic. And then for mental health, so many studies show now that being outside can be very grounding. It can help lower blood pressure. It can help lower anxiety and get kids into a place where they're feeling calm and ready for learning. So I have some kids who are learning self-regulation skills. So we can practice again. Let's just be really still and just pay attention to what you hear and get them out of that dysregulated state and learn how to regulate their own bodies so that they can be successful in the classroom.
Thank you for that, Deb. That entire explanation of just like how connected everything is and just like they're not even realizing they're building those skills. Like that's the exact explanation I wanted to like scratch the nerdy itch in my brain. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's almost like poetic how connected we are and the natural world is, and just being able to put those together for the children is so awesome.
Absolutely. And if I could add just one more thing
Yeah,
quickly,
for sure.
is the use of screens for kids is so detrimental in so many ways. And what I'm finding is I have a lot of kids, if they have been identified as having a reading difficulty, I test their eyes to see if they can track well from right to left to right. And so many cannot, which means that when they're reading a line across from left to right, their eyes skip and they might skip a word or skip a line. And that really impacts their reading fluency. So they know how to read, they can decode words, but when their eyes are moving, their eyes jump and skip, especially when crossing that midline. And being outside and be able to focus far and focus near and scan the environment also helps to fix that. And what I would love to see is less screen use.
Yeah, I think
Universally.
most of our listeners can probably agree with less screen use, but it's nice to hear like the more almost scientific explanation of why screens themselves are so detrimental for kids. Because you always hear like the general consensus, like your phone is the issue, your screen is why you're so upset, and I don't know, it's kind of interesting to hear like why actually it's so detrimental, especially in like kids' formative years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love learning all about you all, and I loved meeting you at the recent WAE awards ceremony that was hosted at Escuela Verde, where you were recognized for the amazing work you do as Administrator of the Year. Yes, congrats. And part of that presentation and part of what I learned about the work that you do here at Lakeview is using outdoor education to address equity issues in Madison and the surrounding area. And I'd love to get into that a little bit more and talk about your experiences, Nu and James and Deb, about how bringing kids outside has kind of helped, balance the scale a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And oh my gosh, what an honor to be nominated and selected as the Administrator of the Year. When I got the notification, I actually texted Debbie. I'm like, I feel like an imposter. Debbie had to reground me and remind me about all of the incredible, amazing things that happen here on a daily basis at Lakeview. When I think about equity, the first thing that comes to mind is access And then the second that comes to mind is opportunities. I grew up in a low income family, have experienced a lot of inequities. I identify as a person of color from a marginalized group. And we know that children and people that are most marginalized also have the least opportunities to have access to things. And in this case, talking about outdoor learning, we're talking about access to outdoor spaces, outdoor activities. And then to one of James's story around my family has told me growing up is that it's not safe to go into the woods or beyond the grass. And so when I think about equity and access to opportunities here at Lakeview, I also think about my own experiences growing up as a kid. And I often find that all of these activities that we talk about that is associated with the outdoors often fall under this category of extracurricular. And extracurricular only exists in a certain time of the day or a certain time of the year or certain groups of people. I mean, we recently just got 33 bikes donated. And yeah, and
Wow.
bike tracks that were created through volunteer time that our students can have access to while they are here at school. And we know that children spend the most time at school. And so access to opportunities shouldn't exist outside of that school time or shouldn't exist in a certain season where a lot of our kids don't have access to experience these seasons. It should be readily available and embedded into day-to-day experiences. And it makes the most sense to me for that to happen at school and in a regular school day. I am just incredibly proud of what we have been able to put together at Lakeview and what we've been able to offer to our students in terms of the experiences. I shared a story recently around how it's so important for me to be able to tap into my students' funds of knowledge and their experiences and for them to be able to share their day-to-day experiences with me in a very authentic and meaningful way. And I remember growing up when you're in school and your teacher would ask, what did you do over the weekend? And my classmates, who are predominantly white, because I happen to be the only student of color in that classroom, they would share about their experiences over the weekend. They would talk about how, they would go to the park and, have a picnic with their family or get to go bike riding or go to the pool. And I would listen to all these stories. And then I'm thinking boy, I really want to fit in. And I want to feel like I'm a part of my classroom community. And I know that the things that I do on the weekends with my family is not anything remotely close to what my classmates are sharing. So I'm going to make something up. So when it comes to my turn to share, I'm yeah, I went to the park with my family too. Yep, I went to the pool and I swam. But really on the weekends, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my mom. We went to an Amish farm. We butchered 30 chickens. I had to pluck all the feathers. And then we bagged up all the chickens and brought them home and stored them in the freezer so that we can eat them as a family, right? Those are just not things that you're comfortable sharing because it's not normal. And so I want to be able to give my students and any students that, get to experience Lakeview an opportunity to say, oh yeah, I have a connection with you. I do that too. And I do it at my school. It's just part of the things that we do on a daily basis. How many kids get to say, oh yeah, for recess, I get to go to the nature station and we get to play in the fort that we all created, by the way. Yeah, it's just so amazing and cool when we think about equity and centering students and making sure that all of our students have access to these opportunities that we often hear about in mainstream media and mainstream stories and mainstream culture.
Wow. That just gave me the goosebumps, Nu. Hearing that, so there are some students out there that, of course, don't have the same opportunities, but then go as far as to want to lie or make up these stories just to fit in is so relatable. And I'm sure something that many students experience even today and in this technological world that we live in. And knowing that administrators like you care so much to provide these experiences and go beyond what is just mandated and what's expected of an administrator to really think about what your students need and specific to your community and the students that you serve as well. So, I mean, I can't say enough great things about what Lakeview does, and that is, half of why we invited you here is to really share these stories and inspire other teachers out there to think more about their students' needs and opportunities that they could provide. I'm curious to open it up to James and Deb on this equity piece and see if you all have maybe stories or other insights that you'd like to share.
I'm just going to carry on with what Nu was saying, that we understand that people of color historically have had a lack of access to green spaces and the outdoors, and more specifically, not just a grass field with an oak tree in the middle. We're talking like a forested area where you can walk and enjoy and experience nature in a much different way than you can on a grass field. And so we've worked really hard over the years to make sure that our students at Lakeview have equitable access to the outdoors. We've really worked hard in that, in making sure that we can get our kids out into the forest and experiencing nature. And we have really worked on like making sure to save those spaces. In 2017, we raised a little over $100,000 to buy another acre and an easement, because that part of the forest that we had been building trails in and using ended up not being on school property. It was owned by a company next door, but it was all the same forest. And so that was going to get bulldozed and turned into housing. And so we raised that money so that we could buy that acre and an easement to continue to save that part of the forest for our students. And now one of the things I'm doing in PE class is that giving our students access to bicycling. And we had about 65% of our students who didn't know how to ride a bike. And because I was able to be in communication with Trek, and I've worked with Trek, they were able to donate 32 bikes to Lakeview. And so now I'm able to incorporate that into my PE curriculum. But not only that, I'm able to incorporate it into my PE curriculum and the outdoor classroom. So my students have been able to help on occasion build some trails out there. They've been able to clear brush and incorporate themselves into the outdoors, not just by biking, but also helping build some of the trails and work into that. And so just trying to break down some of those barriers that our students in general wouldn't have access to. For example, mountain biking is not really that diverse of a community. But now when I have students out there, I have students from 20 different countries who are out in our forest riding bikes on any given day. And so it's a big difference from what you would normally see out on the trails on a mountain biking trail in the state of Wisconsin. And so that's just some of the ways we work on making sure to break down some of those barriers for our students at Lakeview.
And then I would love to add, as a part of the equity is, when we speak of equity, we often think of people with different backgrounds, people of color. We speak of diversity as we have Asian cultures and African American, but we often forget that disability is also included in that term of equity and diversity. There are a number of students identified with disabilities who are at the school, students that I work with, and the opportunities for them to do some of these things in the outdoor greatly benefits their sense of self-worth, their self-esteem. I have kids who are learning to ride bikes, who maybe would not think that they had the ability to ride a bike, but James has a no one gets to say no policy when it comes to, trying to ride a bike or trying to use the rollerblades in gym class or trying to go on the gymnastics equipment in gym class. And the kids are learning that they can do things that they never thought that they would be able to do. The opportunity to kids with disabilities and helping them understand that, they are worthy and they are capable has been really important.
Thank you so much. everyone for sharing that piece. And I love that you brought up accessibility and disabilities as well, Deb, because I do think that's an often left out piece of the puzzle that you all are so amazingly finishing. And with that, I am so excited to learn about what do you guys have planned next? You guys just got 32 bikes, you're making these bike trails, you're making all of this happen for your students. And I can imagine that you all are not ones to just stop at a finish line, right? You're going to move that finish line further because there's always more that we can do. Just so excited to see if there's other projects in the work, other ideas that y'all would love to bring to fruition. I'm not saying this next year by any means, but thinking about the future.
Yeah, I can respond to that. And I'm sure James and Debbie will have things to add. But, for a long time, and connected to what Debbie just shared, our main front doors to the first entrance of our school forest, there's a hill. And every year we have a student or a staff member that utilizes different tools to support them in their mobility. And we also have people who use wheelchairs. And, every year we always dream big and then get pulled right back down to ground level and be like, no, that can't happen this year. But we would love to find a way to be able to build a walkway or a pathway for our people who have a variety of different modes of transporting themselves around to be able to access our school forest and access it in a way that you don't have to go all the way around to get to it. You can just go with your classmates right up into that school forest. And so that is our project every year. We just need to find the right people and the right funding to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we really need to find a carpenter who is good at building us a walkway there. That's what we need to find. My future plans are expanding some of my biking. Gompers Elementary School and Blackhawk Middle School, they are rebuilding their school right now, and it would be nice to be able to eventually, once that school's rebuilt, to work in some bike trails over there that are off the blacktop, because so many of our students learn how to ride bikes at all the elementary schools and the middle schools, and they just learn how to ride in the parking lot. And I would eventually like to bring some more of that outdoor action over for my first step would be trying to figure out how to do it over at Blackhawk Middle School, where we could build trails over there. They don't have a ton of tree canopy over there, but we could find a way of making it off-road, I'm sure, over there. And that could lead into other schools understanding that they can make trails and they can use their forested areas for biking, if at the very least just biking.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know that you're thinking about your students' futures after Lakeview, which is so amazing because a lot of teachers just think, I'm going to worry about the students here. And when they leave this building, I got new students to worry about and I'm not going to think about them. But a lot of those students, I'm assuming, are going to that middle school next year and won't have those same opportunities to bike and get outside as they do now. And so extending those opportunities as they get into higher education is just as important. And so I love that you brought that piece to this puzzle, James. Deb, is there anything that you got working for next year or in the future?
Nothing in particular that I'm looking to change except for what Nu brought up and making sure that we have a wheelchair accessible ramp to get the kiddos that come to Lakeview in wheelchairs up into our forest, because currently it is not safe to bring them up there. It's a pretty steep hill and it does require a ramp to get the wheelchair up there. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing, getting kids outside and continue playing, because that's what kids really need to do.
Debbie, we're going to continue working on that digging bed right outside your room 4 there.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Kids love worms. We have digging beds so kids can find worms.
Awesome. No, yeah, thank you guys for sharing all of those. As we wind our conversation down, I know you guys are in a busy time of the year, And just as a little side note, I really love doing this podcast, but I get so jealous that my elementary school was not like this growing up. Like, you guys are doing such amazing work. You guys are so passionate about the children that it's so fun to be here. But my inner child is hurting a little, but it's okay. Our new generation is having it, and it's beautiful to see. As we kind of wind down, what kind of advice do you have for educators or parents or other listeners who want to spend more time outside or want to entice their own young people in their lives to go outside a little more?
I think Nike stated it best with "just do it."
Yeah, simple and to the point.
Engage with your child outdoors. Don't just send them outdoors, but engage with them to start with at the very least.
I have learned recently, and more like it's just been brought to my attention recently, just around the power of no and how often as adults we say no, whether we verbally say it or say it in our head, and how we say it, right? Like, you might not say no, but you might say like, ooh, be careful. Like, that's another way of saying no. And so really just thinking about my choice words and how I communicate to students, children, to anyone. And when we think about the opportunities to be outside, to learn outside, to engage in the outdoors, and how do we use language in a way that's encouraging so that we're not instilling that fear into our children?
Yeah, perfectly put, Nu. That the power of words really does have something to show for it. Thank you, guys.
And with that, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Thank you to all of our listeners for sticking with us through this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment or question below. We will answer your questions. And until next time, we hope you stay connected to your community, explore the world around you, and engage to make a difference. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode of Healthier, Happier, Smarter, please take a moment to follow the podcast and leave us a rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and enjoy the conversation about connecting health, learning, and the natural world. You can also stay connected with the Wisconsin Association for Environmental Education at waee.org, or find us on social media for resources, upcoming events, or more stories from educators and community leaders across Wisconsin. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and learning.